Introduction: Japanese aircraft carrier Akagi. Akagi, Japanese, Red Castle, was an aircraft carrier built for the Imperial Japanese Navy. IJN. Named after Mount Akagi in present-day Gunma Prefecture. Though she was laid down as an Akagi was converted to an aircraft carrier while still under construction to comply with the terms of the Washington Naval Treaty. The ship was rebuilt from 1935 to 1938 with her original 3 flight decks consolidated into a single enlarged flight deck and an island superstructure. The second Japanese aircraft carrier to enter service, and the first large-ore fleet carrier, Akagi, and the related cargo figured prominently in the development of the IJN's new carrier striking force doctrine that grouped carriers together, concentrating their air power. This doctrine enabled Japan to attain its strategic goals during the early stages of the Pacific War from December 1941 until mid-1942. Akagi's aircraft served in the Second Sino-Japanese War in the late 1930s. Upon the formation of the First Air Fleet or Kido Butai striking force in early 1941, she became its flagship, and remained so for the duration of her service. With other fleet carriers, she took part in the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 and the invasion of Rabaul in the Southwest Pacific in January 1942. The following month, her aircraft bombed Darwin, Australia, and assisted in the conquest of the Dutch East Indies. In March and April 1942, Akagi aircraft helped sink a British heavy cruiser and an Australian destroyer in the Indian Ocean raid. After a brief refit, Akagi and 3 other fleet carriers of the Kido Butai participated in the Battle of Midway in June 1942. After bombarding American forces on the atoll, Akagi and the other carriers were attacked by aircraft from Midway, and the carriers and dive bombers from Enterprise severely damaged Akagi. When it became obvious she could not be saved, she was scuttled by Japanese destroyers to prevent her from falling into enemy hands. The loss of Akagi and 3 other IJN carriers at Midway was a crucial strategic defeat for Japan and contributed significantly to the Allies' ultimate victory in the Pacific. Part 1. Design. Chapter 1. Construction and Launch. Akagi was laid down as an AK, Japan, on the 6th of December 1920. The ship was named after Mount Akagi, following the Japanese ship naming conventions for battle cruisers. Construction was halted, however, when Japan signed the Washington Naval Treaty on the 6th of February 1922. The treaty placed restrictions on the construction of battleships and battle cruisers, although it authorized conversion of 2 battleship or battle cruiser hulls under construction into aircraft carriers of up to 33,000 long tons. 34,000 tons. Displacement. The IJN had decided, following the launch of its first aircraft carrier, to construct 2 larger, faster carriers for operations with major fleet units. The incomplete hulls of an Akagi were thus selected for completion as the 2 large carriers under the 1924 fleet construction program. 24.7 million yen was originally budgeted to complete Akagi as a battle cruiser, and an estimated 8 million yen had been expended when construction stopped in February 1922. Shortly thereafter, the Diet approved an additional 90 million yen to complete Akagi and Amagi as carriers. Construction of Akagi as an aircraft carrier began on the 19th of November 1923. Amagi's hull was damaged beyond economically feasible repair in the Great Kanto earthquake of the 1st of September 1923 and was broken up and scrapped. Akagi, the only remaining member of her class, was launched as a carrier on the 22nd of April 1925 and commissioned at Naval Arsenal on the 25th of March 1927. Although trials continued through November 1927. She was the second carrier to enter service with the IJN, after Hosho and before, which replaced Amagi. Since Akagi was initially conceived as a battle cruiser, the prevailing ship naming conventions dictated that she like her sister ships. Be named after a mountain. Akagi came from Mount Akagi, a dormant volcano in the Kanto region. The name literally means Red Castle. After she was redesignated as an aircraft carrier, her mountain name remained, in contrast to ships like that were originally built as aircraft carriers, which were named after flying creatures. Her name was previously given to the Maya-class gunboat Akagi. Akagi was completed at a length of 261.21, 857 feet 0 inches. Overall, she had a beam of 31 meters, 101.8 inches, and, at deep load, a draft of 8.08 meters, 26 feet 6 inches. She displaced 26,900 long tons, 27,300 metric tons, at standard load, and 34,364 long tons, 34,920 metric tons. At full load, nearly 7,000 long tons, 7,100 metric tons. Less than her designed displacement as a battle cruiser. Her complement totaled 1,600 crew members. Part 1. Design. Chapter 2. Flight deck arrangements. Akagi and Kaga were completed with 3 superimposed flight decks, the only carriers ever to be designed so. The British carriers converted from large light cruisers, and each had 2 flight decks, but there is no evidence that the Japanese copied the British model. It is more likely that it was a case of convergent evolution to improve launch and recovery cycle flexibility by allowing simultaneous launch and recovery of aircraft. Akagi's main flight deck was 190.2 meters, 624 feet 0 inches long. Her middle flight deck, beginning right in front of the bridge, was only 15 meters, 49 feet 3 inches long, and her lower flight deck was 55.02 meters, 180 feet 6 inches long. The utility of her middle flight deck was questionable, as it was so short that only some lightly loaded aircraft could use it, even in an era when the aircraft were much lighter and smaller than during World War II. The upper flight deck sloped slightly from amidships toward the bow and toward the stern to assist landings and takeoffs for the underpowered aircraft of that time. As completed, the ship had 2 main hangar decks and a 3rd auxiliary hangar, giving a total capacity of 60 aircraft. The 3rd and lowest hangar deck was used only for storing disassembled aircraft. The 2 main hangars opened onto the middle and lower flight decks to allow aircraft to take off directly from the hangars while landing operations were in progress on the main flight deck above. The upper and middle hangar areas totaled about 80,375 square feet, 7,467.1 square meters. The lower hangar about 8,515 square feet, 791.1 square meters. No catapults were fitted. Her forward aircraft lift was offset to starboard and 11.8 by 13 meters, 38 feet 9 inches by 42 feet 8 inches. In size, her aft lift was on the center line and 12.8 by 8.4 meters, 42 feet 0 inches by 27 feet 7 inches. The aft elevator serviced the upper flight deck and all 3 hangar decks. Her arresting gear was an unsatisfactory British longitudinal system used on the carrier Furious that relied on friction between the arrest hook and the cables. The Japanese were well aware of this system's flaws, as it was already in use on their first carrier, Hosho, but had no alternatives available when Akagi was completed. It was replaced during the ship's refit in 1931 with a Japanese-designed transverse cable system with 6 wires, and that was replaced in turn before Akagi began her modernization in 1935 by the Model 4 type Shiki 4 Gata. There was no island superstructure when the carrier was completed. The carrier was commanded from a space below the forward end of the upper flight deck. The ship carried approximately 150,000 US gallons, 570,000 liters, of aviation fuel for her embarked aircraft. As originally completed, Akagi carried an air group of 28 Mitsubishi B-1M3 torpedo bombers, 16 Akagi Mu-1N fighters and 16 Mitsubishi Tuama reconnaissance aircraft. Part 1. Design. Chapter 3. Armament and Armor. Akagi was armed with 1050 caliber 20 cm third-year Type No. 1 guns, 6 in casemates aft and the rest in 2 twin-gun turrets, 1 on each side of the middle flight deck. They fired 110 kg, 240 pound projectiles at a rate of 3 to 6 rounds per minute with a muzzle velocity of 870 meters per second, 2,900 feet per second. At 25 degrees, this provided a maximum range between 22,600 and 24,000 meters, 24,700 and 26,200 yards. The turrets were nominally capable of 70 degrees elevation to provide additional anti-aircraft fire, but in practice the maximum elevation was only 55 degrees. The slower rate of fire and the fixed 5 degrees loading angle minimized any real anti-aircraft capability. This heavy gun armament was provided in case she was surprised by enemy cruisers and forced to give battle, but her large and vulnerable flight deck, hangars, and superstructure made her more of a target in any surface action than a fighting warship. Carrier doctrine was still evolving at this time, and the impracticality of carriers engaging in gun duels had not yet been realized. The ship carried dedicated anti-aircraft armament of 6 twin 45 caliber 12 cm 10th year type gun mounts fitted on sponsons below the level of the funnels, where they could not fire across the flight deck, 3 mounts per side. These guns fired 20.3 kg, 45 pound projectiles at a muzzle velocity of 825-830 meters per second, 2,710-2,720 feet per second. At 45 degrees, this provided a maximum range of 16,000 meters, 17,000 yards, and they had a maximum ceiling of 10,000 meters, 11,000 yards. At 75 degrees elevation, their effective rate of fire was 6 to 8 rounds per minute. Akagi's waterline armored belt was reduced from 254 to 152 millimeters, 10 to 6 inches, and placed lower on the ship than originally designed. The upper part of her torpedo bulge was given 102 millimeters, 4 inches of armor. Her deck armor was also reduced from 96 to 79 millimeters, 3.8 to 3.1. The modifications improved the ship's stability by helping compensate for the increased topside weight of the double hangar deck. Part 1. Design. Chapter 4. Propulsion. In Akagi predecessor, Hosho, the hot exhaust gases vented by swiveling funnels posed a danger to the ship, and wind tunnel testing had not suggested any solutions. Akagi and Kaga were given different solutions to evaluate in real-world conditions. Akagi was given 2 funnels on the starboard side. The larger, forward funnel was angled 30 degrees below horizontal with its mouth facing the sea, and the smaller one exhausted vertically a little past the edge of the flight deck. The forward funnel was fitted with a water cooling system to reduce the turbulence caused by hot exhaust gases and a cover that could be raised to allow the exhaust gases to escape if the ship developed a severe list and the mouth of the funnel touched the sea. Kaga adopted a version of this configuration when she was modernized during the mid-1930s. Akagi was completed with 4 geared steam turbine sets, each driving 1 propeller shaft, That produced a total of 131,000 shaft horsepower, 98,000 kilowatts. Steam for these turbines was provided by 19 Type B Campon boilers with a working pressure of 20 kilograms per square centimeter. 1,961 kilopascals, 284 pounds per square inch. Some boilers were oil-fired, and the others used a mix of fuel oil and coal. As a battle cruiser, she was expected to achieve 28.5 knots, 52.8 kilometers per hour, 32.8 miles per hour. But the reduction in displacement from 41,200 to 34,000 long tons, 41,900 to 34,500 tons, increased her maximum speed to 32.5 knots, 60.2 kilometers per hour, 37.4 miles per hour, which was reached during her sea trials on the 17th of June 1927. She carried 3,900 long tons, 4,000 tons of fuel oil and 2,100 long tons, 2,100 tons of coal that gave her a range of 8,000 nautical miles, 15,000 kilometers, 9,200 miles, at 14 knots, 26 kilometers per hour, 16 miles per hour. Part 2. Early service. Akagi joined the combined fleet in August 1927 and was assigned to the 1st Carrier Division upon its formation on the 1st of April 1928, serving as the division's flagship under Rear Admiral Sankichi Takahashi. The carrier's early career was uneventful, consisting of various training exercises. From the 10th of December 1928 to the 1st of November 1929, the ship was captained by Isoroku Yamamoto, future commander of the combined fleet. Akagi was reduced to second-class reserve status on the 1st of December 1931 in preparation for a short refit in which her arresting gear was replaced and her radio and ventilation systems were overhauled and improved. After completion of the refit, Akagi became a first-class reserve ship in December 1932. On the 25th of April 1933, she resumed active service and joined the 2nd Carrier Division and participated in that year's Special Fleet maneuvers. At this time, the IJN's carrier doctrine was still in its early stages. Akagi and the IJN's other carriers were initially given roles as tactical force multiplier supporting the fleet's battleships in the IJN's decisive battle doctrine. In this role, Akagi's aircraft were to attack enemy battleships with bombs and torpedoes. Aerial strikes against enemy carriers were later, beginning around 1932 to 1933, deemed of equal importance, with the goal of establishing air superiority during the initial stages of battle. The essential component in this strategy was that the Japanese carrier aircraft must be able to strike first with a massed, preemptive aerial attack. In fleet training exercises, the carriers began to operate together in front of or with the main battle line. The new strategy emphasized maximum speed from both the carriers and the aircraft they carried as well as larger aircraft with greater range. Thus, longer flight decks on the carriers were required in order to handle the newer, heavier aircraft which were entering service. As a result, on the 15th of November 1935, Akagi was placed in third-class reserve to begin an extensive modernization at Sasebo Naval Arsenal. Part 3. Reconstruction. Akagi's modernization involved far less work than that of Kaga, but took 3 times as long due to financial difficulties related to the Great Depression. The ship's 3 flight decks were judged too small to handle the larger and heavier aircraft then coming into service. As a result, the middle and lower flight decks were eliminated in favor of 2 enclosed hangar decks that extended almost the full length of the ship. The upper and middle hangar area's total space increased to about 93,000 square feet, 8,600 square meters. The lower hangar remained the same size. The upper flight deck was extended to the bow, increasing its length to 249.17 meters, 817 feet 6 inches, and raising aircraft capacity to 86. 61 operational and 25 in storage. A third elevator midships, 11.8 by 13 meters, 38 feet 9 inches by 42 feet 8 inches. In size was added. Her arrestor gear was replaced by a Japanese-designed, hydraulic Type 1 system with 9 wires. The modernization added an island superstructure on the port side of the ship, which was an unusual arrangement. The only other carrier to share this feature was a contemporary, the port side was chosen as an experiment to see if that side was better for flight operations by moving the island away from the ship's exhaust outlets. The new flight deck inclined slightly fore and aft from a point about 3/8 of the way aft. Akagi's speed was already satisfactory, and the only changes to her machinery were the replacement of the mixed coal/oil-fired boilers with modern oil-fired units and the improvement of the ventilation arrangements. Although the engine horsepower increased from 131,200 to 133,000, her speed declined slightly from 32.5 to 31.2 knots. 60.2 to 57.8 kilometers per hour, 37.4 to 35.9 miles per hour. On trials, because of the increase in her displacement to 41,300 long tons, 42,000 metric tons. Her bunkerage was increased to 7,500 long tons, 7,600 metric tons. Of fuel oil, which increased her endurance to 10,000 nautical miles, 18,520 kilometers, 11,510 miles, at 16 knots, 30 kilometers per hour, 18 miles per hour. The rear vertical funnel was changed to match the forward funnel and incorporated into the same casing. The 2 twin turrets on the middle flight deck were removed and 14 twin 25 mm, 1 inch Type 96 gun mounts were added on sponsons. They fired 0.25 kilogram, 0.55 pound projectiles at a muzzle velocity of 900 meters per second, 3,000 feet per second. At 50 degrees, this provided a maximum range of 7,500 meters, 8,200 yards, and an effective ceiling of 5,500 meters, 18,000 feet. The maximum effective rate of fire was only between 110 to 120 rounds per minute due to the frequent need to change the 15-round magazines. 6 Type 95 directors were fitted to control the new 25mm guns, and 2 new Type 94 anti-aircraft directors replaced the outdated Type 91s. After the modernization, Akagi carried 1 Type 89 director for the 20 centimeters, 7.9 inches guns. It is uncertain how many were carried before then. The ship's crew increased to 2,000 after the reconstruction. The ship's anti-aircraft guns were grouped amidships and placed relatively low on the hull. Thus, the guns could not be brought to bear directly forward or aft. Also, the island blocked the forward arcs of the port battery. As a result, the ship was vulnerable to attack by dive bombers. The ship's 12 centimeters 10th year type guns were scheduled to be replaced by more modern 12.7 centimeters, 5.0 inches Type 89 mounts in 1942. The anti-aircraft sponsons were to be raised 1 deck to allow them some measure of cross-deck fire, as was done during Kaga's modernization. However, the ship was lost in combat before the upgrade could take place. Several major weaknesses in Akagi's design were not rectified. Akagi's aviation fuel tanks were incorporated directly into the structure of the carrier, meaning that shocks to the ship, such as those caused by bomb or shell hits, would be transmitted directly to the tanks, resulting in cracks or leaks. Also, the fully enclosed structure of the new hangar decks made firefighting difficult, at least in part because fuel vapors could accumulate in the hangars. Adding to the danger was the requirement of the Japanese carrier doctrine that aircraft be serviced, fueled, and armed whenever possible on the hangar decks rather than on the flight deck. Furthermore, the carrier's hangar and flight decks carried little armor protection, and there was no redundancy in the ship's fire extinguishing systems. These weaknesses would later be crucial factors in the loss of the ship. Part 4. Lead up to World War II. Akagi's modernization was completed on the 31st of August 1938. She was reclassified as a first reserve ship on the 15th of November, but did not rejoin the 1st Carrier Division until the following month. In her new configuration, the carrier embarked 12 Mitsubishi A5M Type 96 Claude fighters with 4 disassembled spares, 19 Aichi D-1 Suzy dive bombers with 5 spares, and 35 Yokosuka B-4Y Jean horizontal/torpedo bombers with 16 spares. She sailed for southern Chinese waters on the 30th of January 1939 and supported ground operations there, including attacks on Guilin and Lhasa, until the 19th of February, when she returned to Japan. Akagi supported operations in central China between the 27th of March and the 2nd of April 1940. She was reclassified as a special-purpose ship. Tokubetsu Lomokan. On the 15th of November 1940, while she was being overhauled, the Japanese experiences off China had helped further develop the IJN's carrier doctrine. One lesson learned in China was the importance of concentration and mass in projecting naval air power ashore. Therefore, in April 1941, the IJN formed the 1st Air Fleet, Okido Butai, to combine all of its fleet carriers under a single command. On the 10th of April, Akagi and Kaga were assigned to the 1st Carrier Division as part of the new carrier fleet, which also included the 2nd. With carriers Hiryu and Soryu. And 5th, with Shikaku and Zuikaku. Carrier divisions. The IJN centered its doctrine on airstrikes that combined the air groups of entire carrier divisions, rather than individual carriers. When multiple carrier divisions were operating together, the division's air groups were combined. This doctrine of combined, massed, carrier-based air attack groups was the most advanced of its kind in the world. The IJN, however, remained concerned that concentrating all of its carriers together would render them vulnerable to being wiped out all at once by a massive enemy air or surface strike. Thus, the IJN developed a compromise solution in which the fleet carriers would operate closely together within their carrier divisions, but the divisions themselves would operate in loose rectangular formations, with approximately 7,000 meters. 7,700 yards. Separating each carrier. The Japanese doctrine held that entire carrier air groups should not be launched in a single massed attack. Instead, each carrier would launch a decload strike of all its aircraft that could be spotted at one time on each flight deck. Subsequent attack waves consisted of the next decload of aircraft. Thus, 1st Air Fleet air attacks would often consist of at least 2 massed waves of aircraft. The 1st Air Fleet was not considered to be the IJN's primary strategic striking force. The IJN still considered the 1st Air Fleet an integral component in the combined fleet's Kantai-Kessen or decisive battle task force centered on battleships. Akagi was designated as the flagship for the 1st Air Fleet, a role the ship retained until her sinking 14 months later. Although the concentration of so many fleet carriers into a single unit was a new and revolutionary offensive strategic concept, the 1st Air Fleet suffered from several defensive deficiencies that gave it, in Mark Petey's words, a glass jaw. It could throw a punch but couldn't take one. Japanese carrier anti-aircraft guns and associated fire control systems had several design and configuration deficiencies that limited their effectiveness. Also, the IJN's Fleet Combat Air Patrol (CAP) consisted of too few fighter aircraft and was hampered by an inadequate early warning system, including lack of radar. In addition, poor radio communications with the fighter aircraft inhibited effective command and control of the CAP. Furthermore, the carriers escorting warships were not trained or deployed to provide close anti-aircraft support. These deficiencies, combined with the shipboard weaknesses previously detailed, would eventually doom Akagi and other First Air Fleet carriers. Part 5, World War II. Chapter 1, Pearl Harbor and subsequent operations. In preparation for the attack, the ship was anchored at Ariake Bay, Kyushu beginning in September 1941 while her aircraft were based at Kagoshima to train with the other First Air Fleet air units for the Pearl Harbor operation. Once preparations and training were completed, Akagi assembled with the rest of the First Air Fleet at Hitokopu Bay in the Kuril Islands on the 22nd of November 1941. The ships departed on the 26th of November 1941 for Hawaii. Commanded by Captain Kiichi Hasegawa, Akagi was Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagamo's flagship for the striking force for the attack on Pearl Harbor that attempted to cripple the United States Pacific Fleet. Akagi and the other 5 carriers, from a position 230 nautical miles, 430 kilometers, 260 miles, north of Oahu, launched 2 waves of aircraft on the morning of the 7th of December 1941. In the first wave, 27 Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo bombers from Akagi torpedoed the battleships, and while 9 of the ship's Mitsubishi A6M0s attacked the air base at Hickam Field. In the second wave, 18 Aichi D-3 Val dive bombers from the carrier targeted the battleships and the light cruiser, the destroyer, and the fleet oiler, while 9 Zeros attacked various American airfields. One of the carrier's Zeros was shot down by American anti-aircraft guns during the first wave attack, killing its pilot. In addition to the aircraft which participated in the raid, 3 of the carrier's fighters were assigned to the CAP. One of the carrier's Zero fighters attacked a Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress heavy bomber that had just arrived from the mainland, setting it on fire as it landed at Hickam, killing one of its crew. In January 1942, together with the rest of the 1st and 5th Carrier Divisions, Akagi supported the invasion of Rabaul in the Bismarck Archipelago, as the Japanese moved to secure their southern defensive perimeter against attacks from Australia. She provided 20 B-5s and 9 Zeros for the initial airstrike on Rabaul on the 20th of January 1942. The 1st Carrier Division attacked Allied positions at nearby Kavieng the following day, of which Akagi contributed 9 A6M0s and 18 D-3s. On the 22nd, Akagi's D-3As and Zeros again attacked Rabaul before returning to Truk on the 27th of January. The 2nd Carrier Division, with Soryu and Hiryu, had been detached to support the invasion of Wake Island on the 23rd of December 1941 and did not reunite with the rest of the carrier mobile striking force until February 1942. Akagi, along with Kaga and the carrier, sought in search of American naval forces raiding the Marshall Islands on the 1st of February 1942, before being recalled. On the 7th of February, Akagi and the carriers of the 1st and 2nd Carrier Divisions were ordered south to the Timor Sea, where, on the 19th of February, from a point 100 nautical miles, 190 kilometers, 120 miles, southeast of the easternmost tip of Timor, they launched airstrikes against Darwin, Australia, in an attempt to destroy its port and airfield facilities to prevent any interference with the invasion of Java. Akagi contributed 18 B-5s, 18 D-3As, and 9 Zeros to the attack, which caught the defenders by surprise. 8 ships were sunk, including the American destroyer, and 14 more were damaged. None of the carrier's aircraft were lost in the attack, and the attack was effective in preventing Darwin from contributing to the Allied defense of Java. On the 1st of March, the American oiler was sunk by D3 Asfrom and Akagi. Later that same day, the American destroyer was attacked and sunk by D3 Asfrom, Akagi and Soryu, in combination with gunfire from 2 battleships and 2 heavy cruisers of the escort force. Akagi and her consorts covered the invasion of Java, although her main contribution appears to have been providing 18 B-5s and 9 Zeros for the 5th of March airstrike on Tjilachip. This group was very successful, sinking 8 ships in the harbor there, and none of Akagi's aircraft were lost. Most of the Allied forces in the Dutch East Indies surrendered to the Japanese later in March. The Kido Butai then sailed for Staring Bay on Celebes Island to refuel and recuperate. Part 5, World War II. Chapter 2, Indian Ocean Raid. On the 26th of March, Akagi set sail for the Indian Ocean Raid with the rest of the Kido Butai. The Japanese intent was to defeat the British Eastern Fleet and destroy British air power in the region in order to secure the flank of their operations in Burma. On the 5th of April 1942, Akagi launched 17 B-5s and 9 Zeros in an airstrike against Colombo, Ceylon, which damaged the port facilities. None of the aircraft were lost, and the Zero pilots claimed to have shot down a dozen of the defending British fighters. Later that day, 17 D3 Asfrom Akagi helped to sink the British heavy cruisers, and on the 9th of April, she attacked Trincomalee with 18 B-5s, escorted by 6 Zeros, which claimed to have shot down 5 Hawker Hurricane fighters, only 2 of which can be confirmed from Allied records, without loss to themselves. Meanwhile, a flight plane from the battleship spotted the small aircraft carrier, escorted by the Australian destroyer, and every available D3O was launched to attack the ships. Akagi contributed 17 dive bombers, and they helped to sink both ships. They also spotted the oil tanker RF Athelstone, escorted by the corvette, as well, and sank both without loss. During the day's actions, the carrier narrowly escaped damage when 9 British Bristol Blenheim bombers from Ceylon penetrated the CAP and dropped their bombs from 11,000 feet, 3,400 meters, just missing the carrier and the heavy cruiser. 4 of the Blenheims were subsequently shot down by CAP fighters, and 1 was shot down by aircraft from the carrier's returning airstrike. After the raid, the carrier mobile striking force returned to Japan to refit and replenish. On the 19th of April 1942, while near Taiwan during the transit to Japan, Akagi, Soryu, and Hiryu were sent in pursuit of the American carriers which had launched the Doolittle raid. They found only empty ocean, however, for the American carriers had immediately departed the area to return to Hawaii. Akagi and the other carriers shortly abandoned the chase and dropped anchor at Hashirajima Anchorage on the 22nd of April. On the 25th of April, Captain Teijiro Aoki relieved Hasegawa as skipper of the carrier. Having been engaged in constant operations for 4.5 months, the ship, along with the other 3 carriers of the 1st and 2nd Carrier Divisions, was hurriedly refitted and replenished in preparation for the combined fleet's next major operation, scheduled to begin 1 month hence. The 5th Carrier Division, with Shikaku and Zuikaku, had been detached in mid-April to support Operation Mo, resulting in the Battle of the Coral Sea. While at Hashirajima, Akagi's air group was based ashore in Kagoshima and conducted flight and weapons training with the other 1st Air Fleet carrier units. Part 5, World War II. Chapter 3, Midway. Concerned by the U.S. carrier strikes in the Marshall Islands, Les Salamaua, and the Doolittle raids, Yamamoto determined to force the U.S. Navy into a showdown to eliminate the American carrier threat. He decided to invade and occupy Midway Island, which he was sure would draw out the American carrier forces to battle. The Japanese code-named the Midway Invasion Operation Me. On the 25th of May 1942, Akagi set out with the combined fleet's carrier striking force in the company of carriers Kaga, and which constituted the 1st and 2nd Carrier Divisions, for the attack on Midway Island. Once again, Nagumo flew his flag on Akagi. Because of damage and losses suffered during the Battle of the Coral Sea, the 5th Carrier Division with carriers Shikaku and Zuikaku was absent from the operation. Akagi's aircraft complement consisted of 24 Zeros, 18 D3As, and 18 B5Ns, with the fleet positioned 250 nautical miles, 460 kilometers, 290 miles, northwest of Midway Island at dawn. 04:45 local time. On the 4th of June 1942, Akagi's portion of the 108-plane combined air raid was a strike on the airfield on Eastern Island with 18 dive bombers escorted by 9 Zeros. The carriers B-5Ns were armed with torpedoes and kept ready in case enemy ships were discovered during the Midway operation. The only loss during the raid from Akagi's air group was 1 Zero shot down by a fire and 3 damaged. 4 dive bombers were damaged, of which 1 could not be repaired. Unbeknownst to the Japanese, the US Navy had discovered the Japanese plan by breaking the Japanese cipher and had prepared an ambush using its 3 available carriers, positioned northeast of Midway. One of Akagi's torpedo bombers was launched to augment the search for any American ships that might be in the area. The carrier contributed 3 Zeros to the total of 11 assigned to the initial combat air patrol over the 4 carriers. By 7 o'clock, the carrier had 11 fighters with the CAP, which helped to defend the Kido Butai from the first US attackers from Midway Island at 07:10. At this time, Nagumo's carriers were attacked by 6 US Navy Grumman TBF Avengers from Torpedo Squadron 8, Vermont 8, and 4 United States Army Air Forces, USAF, B-26 Marauders, all carrying torpedoes. The Avengers went after Hiryu while the Marauders attacked Akagi. The 30 CAP Zeros in the air at this time, including the 11 from Akagi, immediately attacked the American aircraft, shooting down 5 of the Avengers and 2 of the B-26S. One of Akagi's Zeros, however, was shot down by defensive fire from the B-26S. Several of the Marauders dropped their torpedoes, but all either missed or failed to detonate. One B-26, piloted by Lieutenant James Murray, strafed Akagi after dropping its torpedo, killing 2 men. Another, either attempting a suicide ramming, or out of control due to battle damage or an incapacitated pilot, narrowly missed crashing into Akagi's bridge, where Nagumo was standing, before it cartled into the sea. At 07:15, Admiral Nagumo ordered the B-5Ns on Kaga and Akagi reamed with bombs for another attack on Midway itself. This process was limited by the number of ordnance carts used to handle the bombs and torpedoes, and ordnance elevators, preventing torpedoes from being struck below until after all the bombs were moved up from their magazine, assembled, and mounted on the aircraft. This process normally took about an hour and a half. More time would be required to bring the aircraft up to the flight deck, warm up and launch the strike group. Around 07:40, Nagumo reversed his order when he received a message from one of his scout aircraft that American warships had been spotted. 3 of Akagi's CAP Zeros landed aboard the carrier at 07:36. At 07:40, her lone scout returned, having sighted nothing. Chapter 3, Midway. Section 1, Sinking. At 07:55, the next American strike from Midway arrived in the form of 16 Marine SBD-2 Dauntless dive bombers of VMSB 241 under Major Lofton Henderson. Akagi's 3 remaining CAP fighters were among the 9 still aloft that attacked Henderson's planes, shooting down 6 of them as they executed a fruitless glide bombing attack on Hiryu. At roughly the same time, the Japanese carriers were attacked by 12 US FB-17 Flying Fortresses, bombing from 20,000 feet, 6,100 meters. The high altitude of the B-17S gave the Japanese captains enough time to anticipate where the bombs would land and successfully maneuver their ships out of the impact area. 4 B-17S attacked Akagi, but missed with all their bombs. Akagi reinforced the CAP with launches of 3 Zeros at 0808 and 4 at 0832. These fresh Zeros helped defeat the next American airstrike from Midway, 11 Vought SB-2U Vindicators from VMS B-241, which attacked the battleship starting around 0830. 3 of the Vindicators were shot down, and Haruna escaped damage. Although all the American airstrikes had thus far caused negligible damage, they kept the Japanese carrier forces off balance as Nagumo endeavored to prepare a response to news received at 0820 of the sighting of American carrier forces to his northeast. Akagi began recovering her Midway strike force at 0837 and finished shortly after 9 o'clock. The landed aircraft were quickly struck below, while the carrier's crews began preparations to spot aircraft for the strike against the American carrier forces. The preparations, however, were interrupted at 0918 when the first American carrier aircraft to attack were sighted. These consisted of 15 Douglas TBD Devastator torpedo bombers of date, led by John C. Waldron from the carrier. The 6 airborne Akagi CAP-Zeros joined the other 15 CAP fighters currently aloft in destroying Waldron's planes. All 15 of the American planes were shot down as they attempted a torpedo attack on Soryu, leaving one surviving aviator treading water. Shortly afterwards, 14 Devastators from Vermont 6 from the carrier, led by Eugene Lindsay, attacked. Lindsay's aircraft tried to sandwich Kaga, but the CAP, reinforced by an additional 8 Zeros launched by Akagi at 0933 and 0940, shot down all but 4 of the Devastators, and Kaga dodged the torpedoes. Defensive fire from the Devastators shot down one of Akagi's Zeros. Minutes after the torpedo plane attacks, American carrier-based dive bombers arrived over the Japanese carriers almost undetected and began their dives. It was at this time, around 10:20, that in the words of Jonathan Parshall and Anthony Tully, the Japanese air defenses would finally and catastrophically fail. 28 dive bombers from Enterprise, led by C. Wade McCluskey, began an attack on Kaga, hitting her with at least 4 bombs. At the last minute, one of McCluskey's elements of 3 bombers from P6, led by Squadron Commander Richard Best, who deduced Kaga to be fatally damaged, broke off and dove simultaneously on Akagi. At approximately 10:26, the 3 bombers hit her with one 1,000-pound, 450-kilogram bomb and just missed with 2 others. The first near-miss landed 510 meters, 1633 feet, to port, near her island. The third bomb just missed the flight deck and plunged into the water next to the stern. The second bomb, likely dropped by Best, landed at the aft edge of the middle elevator and detonated in the upper hangar. This hit set off explosions among the fully armed and fueled B-5N torpedo bombers that were being prepared for an airstrike against the American carriers, resulting in an uncontrollable fire. At 10:29, Captain Aoki ordered the ship's magazines flooded. The forward magazines were promptly flooded, but the aft magazines were not due to valve damage, likely caused by the near-miss aft. The ship's main water pump also appears to have been damaged, greatly hindering firefighting efforts. On the upper hangar deck, at 10:32, damage control teams attempted to control the spreading fires by employing the one-shot CO2 fire suppression system. Whether the system functioned or not is unclear, but the burning aviation fuel proved impossible to control, and serious fires began to advance deeper into the interior of the ship. At 10:40, additional damage caused by the near-miss aft made itself known when the ship's rudder jammed 30 degrees to starboard during an evasive maneuver. Shortly thereafter, the fires broke through the flight deck and heat and smoke made the ship's bridge unusable. At 10:46, Admiral Nagumo transferred his flag to the light cruiser. Akagi stopped dead in the water at 13:50 and her crew, except for Captain Teijiro Aoki and damage control personnel, was evacuated. She continued to burn as her crew fought a losing battle against the spreading fires. The damage control teams and Captain Aoki were evacuated from the still floating ship late that night. At 04:50 on the 5th of June, Yamamoto ordered Akagi scuttled, saying to his staff, "I was once the captain of Akagi, and it is with heartfelt regret that I must now order that she be sunk." Destroyers Arashi, Hagakes, Mikaz, and Noraki each fired one torpedo into the carrier and she sank, bow first, at 05:20 at. 267 men of the ship's crew were lost, the fewest of any of the Japanese fleet carriers lost in the battle. The loss of Akagi and the 3 other IJN carriers at Midway, comprising 2/3 of Japan's total number of fleet carriers and the experienced corps of the First Air Fleet, was a crucial strategic defeat for Japan and contributed significantly to Japan's ultimate defeat in the war. In an effort to conceal the defeat, Akagi was not immediately removed from the Navy's registry of ships, instead being listed as unmanned before finally being struck from the registry on the 25th of September 1942. Postscript. Information about this video and recording. This recording contained audio cues that marked punctuation that is ordinarily obscured to an audiobook listener. They were denoted as follows: and denotes left and right parentheses. This recording is a derivative work from Wikipedia. Speech is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0 Unported license. All images and music were programmatically checked for a license compatible with Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0 Unported license, and all YouTube requirements for fair use. Specific licenses are detailed in the video. Authors of the respective article are given attribution in the video description. Request an article by Patreon or PayPal donation.